Hello world, and welcome to my first video. Today I'm going to do a cottonwood bark carving. I've been doing cottonwood bark for about 6 or 7 years now, and I just love working with it. It is so easy to carve, and you could be so creative with it. So I knew I was going to make a house, cut off the roof with a bandsaw, and I cut that little notch in the side, which I don't know if it turned out well. But you can let me know in the comments if anybody watches. Now, I never really have any plans when I go into these cottonwood carvings. Usually I kind of cut out a roof. I might have an idea if I want to do a house, and then I just start taking off wood. I start taking off the bark where I think it needs to go. You can see me using a couple different tools here. I'm using the of course, a carving knife from Mora, and some flex cut gouges. Alright. Honestly, this is my first video, so my commentary is going to be all jacked up. I'm not even going to try and edit it because I've spent so much time already working on the video itself and putting it together, figuring out what speeds will work best so it doesn't last too long. Like I said, I never go into these with a plan. I just start doing it. I start pulling, and eventually I start getting ideas. There's elements that I want to see. Certain areas, like that area that I just carved off, the wood just looked horrible. It doesn't look good. It won't add anything to the final product, so I just cut it off and I'll put something there later. So I had kind of an idea here, and I started thinking about carving a little cave that water would come out of and drip down onto the bottom piece. These scan lines on the video are a little bit annoying. You can see the little black bars going up. That's either the LED lighting in the garage or my camera settings. It's not a great camera. It's a good Sony A5000, so it gets the job done, but it's not fantastic. Scan lines sometimes go away when I messed with the ISO settings. So I finally got everything out that I really wanted out, and I started drawing in windows, where I want the windows to go, what they should look like, basic shapes and stuff. Once I got them all drawed in, is drawed a word? I don't know. Once I got them all in, I don't know. I got the little flex cut, the medium or small V gouge, and started gouging out along the lines. This gives me something to work with, so I can start carving around those, carving a little bit more wood away from that area without taking out the wood and everything. So you can kind of see I'm pulling everything out, cutting it down to where I made the gouge lines at. Alright. So I got this nice vise for Christmas. It spins, twists. You can screw your project onto one end and pop it into the vise. So I figured I'd use it to finish this project I've been working on here. So now it turns, and it comes as this little thing, so you can tighten up the bottom right there. And boom, solid. I've never had one of these before, so it'll be interesting to see how it works with my carvings. So I was a little disappointed right here. For some reason my camera stopped recording while I was doing a lot of this carving here, carving some brick down at the bottom and starting the slats. But so what I did is I decided I wanted to put brick down at the bottom and have some wood slats up top. And the brick is just carved with a regular V tool. I think I used a small V tool for that. And then the wood slats I used a V tool, and then used the my detail knife to shape the wooden boards. So what I'm doing right here is I'm using a diamond bit on my Dremel to kind of sand out some of the areas and round them out a little bit. You can't fit sandpaper into a lot of these little tiny grooves and cracks, and the diamond bit on the Dremel works really good. Right there you can see I'm putting in some more brick on that little side piece. The Dremel I'm using is a Dremel Stylo. Picked it up a while back and I just love the thing. It's not very powerful, but it is really good for detail. If you need to do big work and take out lots of wood, it's not going to help you much. The motor will just die out on you. But if you're doing little detail and stuff like that, it works great. So you see right there, I'm using the V tool and kind of carving out around the boards, trying to get a little detail into those. Now I'm going to start carving around the windows. And you can see right up here, I make a mistake. This piece of cottonwood was actually very, very dry. So I chipped out a lot and was able to get it back in there with some super glue. Super glue is a wood carver's most essential tool. Not only does it repair wood, but it repairs the wood carver. I have cut myself a couple times, and usually I just close the cut up, cover it with super glue, and it's good. Super glue makes a really good quick and dirty bandage when you don't have any other bandages around. And really it's better than a bandage because it'll hold your cut closed until it heals. Cut myself once and it was pretty deep. Covered it with super glue, and I decided, maybe I should go to the doctor the next day, and told them that I covered it with super glue, and they were surprised. I don't know why they're surprised. Doctor's office uses super glue also to cut for cuts. So again, you see I got the Dremel out and I'm using it to kind of carve out some of the area in there. The Dremel's really good for carving some of this areas out without chipping the wood. So with a knife, it's very easy to chip wood out, chip pieces off you don't want to cut out. The little Dremel, it doesn't chip out as easy. So right here, I wanted to cut some rocks in there, so I penciled them in and then started carving along the lines. Rocks aren't too difficult to do. The main thing is to get it really deep in between the rocks. And the biggest thing about carving is contrast. You want to see the lights and the darks. And getting in there with a knife really kind of emphasizes some of those rocks in there. If you get really deep in the cracks, it emphasizes it even more and just makes them pop. Now getting into the cracks on the inside was actually very difficult. It's hard to get in there when none of the tools will fit. So I did the best I could. I used a combination of the knife and the Dremel to try and get in there and chisel out a lot of that stuff. So as you can see in there with the Dremel, a lot of times when I'm doing some of these carvings, I used to go to a carving club. I still go to the carving club here, but one of my old carving clubs I would go to in South Dakota, I'd be carving on cottonwood bark, and somebody would tell me, "You're taking off too much of the bark." which is bullshit. I mean, you take as much as you need off to get the project, to get what you want, basically. However, every piece is going to be different. If it takes a lot of bark off, it takes a little bit of bark off. Don't be a traditionalist. Well, I can't say don't be a traditionalist. I'm not a traditionalist. I will do whatever feels right for the piece I'm working on. I don't hold myself to any silly little rules about using sandpaper or using carving too much bark off. So right here, putting in the roof tiles, using the V-gouge to carve out underneath the tiles, and then again to carve each individual one out. And this just kind of basically setting your outline, almost roughing out. Then you grab your knife and you start carving up each slat so that it looks a little bit more like it goes underneath. Then you can carve along the sides of each of the slats to make them a little bit more rounder, give them a little more personality. And then I'll use the knife to go back down between each one of the slats after I'm done. I'm just kind of cut it down like that. Just cut down the slat, because the knife mark will add a lot of depth, contrast to each one. So you see here, carving it out, and then I'll go through with like a little rounded gauge or a little rounded one and carve little dimples onto the slats to make them look a little more weathered. Give it a little more personality. I like making the roofs sometimes run down. Each project's different. Not every project will have a roof. Not every project will have slats. So here I'm doing the brick on the chimney. And this is just a little V tool. This one's a micro V tool. So if you're a beginner wood carver, you don't need much really. You just a nice roughing knife, a detail knife, and maybe a V tool. A V tool is probably the most useful of the gouges you can have. And yeah, I lost focus there. Hope everyone liked looking at my hand. But you can see right here, just kind of popping in the little bricks and make it look pretty. Flip it over, do the back. Doing brick like this can actually be very tedious. And my the way it was sitting, my fingers were starting to hurt a little bit, kind of holding everything together, and the way it was sitting on the vise. This inside is almost impossible. I did not have the tools. I'm not sure. I would need like an angled V tool or something to get in there further. But I did the top as best I could. And then I took the Dremel and carved out the top there so it actually looked like a hole in the chimney. And then run over and do the other side. Here you can kind of see I put a little bit of curve into the roof slats. I like to put a lot of curves and roundness in my carvings. It gives it a little bit more of an organic look and less manufactured. It's more visually interesting to see something rounded and curved than it is to see something straight and flat. So when I do a lot of these, I like to put in a lot of rounded edges and kind of mix the rounded edges with the straight flat to make it look a little more interesting. Start carving out the back now, and that requires me to take it off the vise. I really enjoyed using that vise. I used it a lot more. So I start by outlining where I needed to take the back out. I want to take the back out so that you can see through the windows and get that little bit of contrast. Sometimes I'll put a little light bulb in there. For this, I was using a very large gouge. That's actually a gouge for hammers to use with a mallet on big pieces, which I've never done yet. I hope to soon. But it started cracking right in between where the two pieces meet, so I had to go to the use the Dremel. That right there, it's a wireless Dremel up to 25,000 RPM. It's not a Dremel, but it's a rotary tool that I got off Wish, and it surprisingly works really well. Very powerful, and it just tears through the wood. That bit is a really good bit for just taking out as much material as possible. You can kind of see I went down to the front just so I can see kind of how deep it was. When you're doing windows, you want to carve around the windows as thin as possible because it looks really odd when you look at a house like this and the windows are half an inch thick to the back. It doesn't look great. So you want to cut down. I wanted to bring the windows down as much as possible to get them to look a little bit normal. So right here, it was about the end of the day, so I started filling in the little holes from the screws with sawdust and covering them with super glue. And then I kind of opened it up a little bit, put super glue all along that crack there, wiggled it back and forth. And I tried to clamp it, but it wasn't going to hold, so I just held it together for a little bit and took it inside. It is too cold in the garage for the super glue to set well, so I took it in the house overnight. Okay, so I came back out the next day, and it was time to start detailing the windows a little bit. So I got out a smaller bit. That big one is really good for chunking out a lot of wood, but it's not the nicest look, and I have to sand it back down again because it just tears out the wood. See, I got this little smaller bit that is still really good at taking out the wood, but it doesn't have to be sanded as much afterwards. It has a little bit smoother cut to it. So once I cut it out on the back, I cut out the front, make the windows look a little bit more like windows. I took the knife to them. Right there, you can see some of them are just really ugly still. I gotta really work on those. So right here I'm using my detail knife and a diamond file. I'm going to pick up these diamond files pretty much anywhere. I think I got this set at Harbor Freight for like $2 or $3. But they are really, really good for getting into little detail cracks like this and sanding it down. for areas where you just can't get sandpaper into. So getting a little bit closer to the edge now, and then sanding around all the edges to get them looking nice on the outside as well. Okay, so right here I put in some dimpling around the windows, and that's just like a round bit. It was a round cutting bit that I just tap 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 all the way around. And it adds a nice little texture to the windowsills there, and it covers up any little imperfections that I couldn't get. This right here is basically a piece of Scotch-Brite on a rotary tool, so it pulls off all the little chunks. So here I started adding, I decided to put some rocks here on the side also, kind of on the other side of where the waterfall will be. And I just went through, outlined them, started gouging them out, and then I'll get in there with the Dremel, carve them out a little bit more, and then go back to the knife and shape them a little bit better. So here we are, the mostly finished product. This is about as far as I can get at the moment. It is too cold in the garage to put any polyurethane on it. Usually I'll either spray it or put on a polyurethane coat, but it is in the 40s in the garage right now. So once the temperature gets into the 70s, I'll go back out there, put on the polyurethane, put in the water, finish that up, and I'll go ahead and I'll make sure and record that and post this up later along with this. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments if you did. Thanks.